So welcome to this lecture number 5. I hope you had a good break. And especially in Uzbekistan, of course, because here we did not have any break at all. So today is the 5th lecture in the basic part of the course, and it's with ecosystems, a basic question for sustainable development to understand ecosystems theoretically and practically. And do you see a new slide now?
Yes.
Very good. Now I did it a little different from last time. It's working. So the resources on which ecosystems are built include soil, is a resource, water, also that,
Lars,
and vegetation, animals.
We see the first. We see the first slide only, the one with the names on.
Aha, okay. Whew. What about that then?
I can see the second one with the 4 different types of bases for ecosystems.
Okay. What
Okay.
about now? Do you see this? I tried with another one.
Now I can see it.
Rustam, you see the second slide saying ecosystems are built and so on.
Ecosystems are built of resources and for...
Very good. Then you have the right slide. You see there, I also added atmosphere because there is an exchange of gases between, the other 3 and atmosphere, although it's seldom, discussed in connection with this, but anyhow, it's part of the system. And of course, these are sometimes called supporting ecosystem services. Soil is formed and destroyed. And of course, when it comes to green matter, plants and so on, they are also formed and decayed. The water is turning into cycles, and nutrients as well. And of course, these are home for all living conditions, home for all living species and conditions for them. So this is a basic. We will look at one at a time and start with the land area of the planet we are living on. And of course, society has caused tremendous changes in the land surface of the planet. I will not repeat the figures here. You can look at them yourself later on. But you see here, this is the cultivated areas of the land. Of course, it didn't exist before man entered the scene here, but it's little more than 30% of the land's surface area of the planet, which is cultivated for crop production and so on. Here you see the development. So this is a rather new development on this huge difference, coming up to almost 5 billion hectares over the entire world. You see the built-up area, the one that consists of our cities, our roads, and so on, it's about 2%. So it's very little. The huge thing is the, I have to move this a little, is the grazing areas and the cropland, production of crop, and so on. This is another overview. You see the surface of the planet is, it's 71% is water and 29% is land. Of this land, about 70% is habitable. Some other are, of course, glaciers, completely icy, and deserts, barren land. That's what you have in Uzbekistan quite much, Central Asia in quite much. Of the habitable land, about half of it is used for agriculture, crop production, and 37% for forest. So it's only some 11% left for others. And of course, you can see a little more data on agriculture, how much is used for livestock and how much for crop production and so on. The soil is a very important topic to deal with when it comes to ecosystem services. You know, soil is eroded almost 100 times faster than it's newly produced. So these areas in, for example, northern United States, where there are meters of organic soil, much, much less. So soil abuse remains a threat to modern society. And of course, if we continue like that, the whole planet will be more or less desert. So this has to change. And it is possible to produce soil also. It's done naturally, of course, but we have to support it. These data come from a professor in Seattle called David Montgomery, who put quite much effort into looking into soil production and erosion. So what can we do to preserve and build soil? Well, when it comes to agriculture, we should not have too much tillage, because then, you know, soil comes into contact with air in a large extent and is oxidized, and the organic content is oxidized and produces carbon dioxide and lost. Instead, we should have minimum tillage or no tillage farming is possible. Or agroforestry, that is, you have crop production and forests, trees together. And be very careful with the composting of organic material. And it's also possible to dig organic material, wood, for example, into the soil. And this produces biochar, which which will fertilize the soil and stay for a very long time. Well, of course, there has perhaps to be incentives to farmers and so on to actually do this. And that could include carbon funding that is based on carbon dioxide emission or sequestration, and legal, of course, there could be rules about how to do this. So that's so much for soil on the land, but there are also much forest, as we saw. But the forest on the original forest of the planet, very much of it is gone. About half of it is actually doesn't exist any longer. Here you can see the green, dark green areas is forest today, and the light green areas is forests that were there originally before deforestation by humans. You can see that on the northern part, you have the boreal forest, for example, Sweden, Finland, northern Siberia, and so on, boreal forest. And then around the equator, you have the tropical forest. Both of them are very much hit by deforestation, which is not sustainable, I should say. Here you see tree cover loss during a period that was measured. So it's serious and it's very big. Critical concerns when it comes to forest, you stop deforestation. So we are about deforestation. We are concerned about desertification. This is a huge topic, desertification. And we also see wetland decrease. We take away wetlands. And we see much insufficient nature protection. So these are critical concerns for the land area of our planet. When it comes to water, we should understand that much has been done to actually impact on water. Wetlands have been drained, rivers have been straightened, and surface water extracted for irrigation and other uses. So irrigation is very serious because It is too much. The water table in very many places in the world is sinking, sinking, and sinking. For example, in China, it's down to many tens of meters as it was originally, just a couple of meters. So the amount of water for human use is reduced, and it will be a crisis very soon, according to many researchers. Waters have also been eutrophied, that is, the content of nutrients in water have increased, nutrients being phosphorus. Some lakes have been acidified because of industrial pollution. And of course, the other kind of pollutants, chemical pollutants. I think this is more serious in Uzbekistan than the acidification. You have chemical pollution in your rivers. So the eutrophication means too much nutrients in the environment leads to overgrowth in the water. That is the eutrophication. Eutrophication means that new species take over, ecosystems are changing. It's serious in the Nordic countries. I'm not quite sure about Central Asia. And the chemical pollution, of course, most serious is so-called persistent organic pollutants, POPs. Those are chemicals which are not broken down in the environment so easily. And they lead to toxification of various animals and so on. And those pollutants which are not broken down, they accumulate in the biosystem. So they are very large concentration in top predators. For example, birds of prey and so on. Human is also a top predator, you know, so we are also exchanges. I could make a long list of persistent organic pollutants, but I would just mention polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs. They are produced because of the wide use of chlorinated organics in industry. Heavy metals are also serious here, but of course they are not organic, but they accumulate also. I think in your Amodaria and Sirdaia, you have too much chemicals, as far as I understand, from the use of chemicals in your agriculture. When it comes to impacts on water environments, I would like to mention especially coral reefs. Coral reefs are all over the world in oceans, so it's not in Uzbekistan at all, of course, but they are very much degraded because of the increasing temperature, the global warming we have. So it's serious. You can see here the Great Barrier Reef east of Australia. To the left, it's when it's fresh. Then you see increasing temperature, and to the right, they're completely destroyed. It's serious because it is the reproduction area for very many fish and other species in the oceans. So the critical concerns when it comes to the water is overuse of surface and groundwater. And it's very much because water is used for irrigation too much. Irrigation needs to be done more efficiently. And there's also draining of rivers and wetlands because of water overuse. And as I mentioned, eutrophication, acidification, and chemical pollution. And then we have animals and biodiversity. There's a crisis when it comes to the decreasing biodiversity since very long. And it has been accelerating for thousands of years. You may not know, but also in North America, there were a megafauna, huge animals. This is not there any longer. If you don't perhaps count the pumas or something, And of course, one should remember that the American bison is still around, although it was very much threatened for a while. The European megafauna is practically gone. We have the African megafauna, with giraffes and lions and so forth. That is still possible to save it. This is for the big animals. When it comes to fish in the oceans, especially, we already saw that peak fish happened in 1990s, and since then it's going down. The most terrible example is the extinction of the Newfoundland cod population. So the biological part of our planet is now reduced very much because humans and human livestock is increasing so enormously much. Humans and human livestock, when it comes to mammals, it's about 96% of all mammal biomass on the planet. All other mammals, whales, sea lions, bears, elephants, and so on, are about 4.2%. So it's so dominated by us. Mammals, of course, and the human livestock represent about 0.03% of the biomass. So most biomass are other things, namely plants and bacteria. They account for about 95% of all living biomass, and that is, of course, the basis for all higher organisms. So what we see is extinction rate that is much larger than it was before humans entered the scene. Here you see number of 1,000 species per thousands of years extinct. In fossil records, it's about 1. Recently, it's about 100, and we expect it to increase. So you see here, 100 to 1,000 times quicker extinction rate of biological all our species compared to what it was before. Most of this depend on habitat loss. That is, we took away the places where they could live, all these animals and plants and so on. So you see how large percent of the habitat, the land area, that is left. It's the green areas. And of course, it's different in different parts of the world. Mediterranean forest is not much at all. In some other parts, it's a little bit better, but it's on the average closer to 50% was gone. And you see it's expected to increase in the future. So it's much less, perhaps 25% or something in the future, if it continues like it does now. You may know that there are efforts to reduce this destruction of habitats. We'll come to that. If we look at this picture, which I've shown before, the planetary boundaries, you see that the 9 planetary boundaries that was examined in some detail, biodiversity is by far the one that is in the worst situation. Of course, if the number of species are lost, it's almost 100 to 1,000 times quicker than it was before us. So it's serious. You can simply that sustainable society cannot tolerate biodiversity loss on the present scale. And habitat loss is the largest impact in our world right now. So it's serious. The critical concerns then for this is habitat loss, invasive species, is coming into areas where they didn't exist before, overhunting, overfishing, and so on. Ocean. Well, we should look at ecosystem services. These consist of 3 different kinds. So provisioning services, the goods produced and or provided by ecosystems. We know the crop, of course, what we eat and live from, the fiber, which we use for building things or making clothes, for example, cotton, and so on. Regulating services. They regulate ecosystems, these services. For example, weather and climate, and so on. And then cultural, non-material benefits from ecosystems. We should not forget at all. They are very important for people. So just the nature as part for us to be in is very important. It's also a big source of inspiration for artists and so on. So looking at some of them, the provisioning services, you have food, crops, livestock, fisheries, and so on. For fiber, you have cotton, you have timber, then genetic resources, very important, and so on. Some of these systems are of extreme value when it comes to economic value. And I should mention climate regulation, carbon dioxide sequestration. For example, carbon dioxide are bound in forest, for example. I mean, this is nature is a sink for carbon dioxide. Other things that we should mention in regulation, ecosystem process, regulate erosion, water purification, pollination, very important. Insects pollinate our fruit trees, and so on. And then, of course, when it comes to the third kind of ecosystem services, we have spiritual and religious values and so on. Educational values, aesthetic values, sense of place, ecotourism, recreation. We like to be out in nature. So there are a number of documents and agreements that try to come to grips with the biological diversity. And of course, one of the most important is the UN Convention on Biological Diversity that was written down in 1992 Rio Earth Summit, UNCED. And this is now parties, practically all countries in the world are parties to this. All countries in the world are parties to this. And the convention has three main goals. That is conservation of biodiversity, the sustainable use of biodiversity, especially genetic resources, and this sustainable documents for sustainable development is often understood that this for protection of biodiversity is a very important document. There are several institutions in the world who try to work with this. I just would like to mention International Conservation Union, the IUCN, headquartered in Switzerland. They produced several documents that especially concerns the ethical sustainable development. For example, caring for the earth in 1992, I believe. And the IUCN, which is from 1964, they try to keep track of diversity, and they produce a so-called red list of threatened species. Species that we should try to protect because they are threatened to become extinct. So this is an important part of their job in IUCN. Another one is called the Earth Charter. This is sort of, it is a corresponding documents to the right of humans. It's now instead it's the right of all nature, community of life. So, and this Earth Charter has not been adopted by the United Nations, but it it was hoped that it should be adopted by the United Nations in year 2000, but it did not yet happen. It gives nature a right to exist in the same level as societies. It's worth looking into. Then we have the Millennium Ecosystems Assessment. It's a huge project that was done with thousands of experts from all over the world. They went through a number of ecosystem services and looked at it and see what was the situation. And I should look at this first. They produced a report in 2005 and able to say that most of the resources they looked at, the ecosystem services they looked at, are actually in a state of degradation. 60% about are in the state of degradation. Some are increasing, for example, crops, livestock, aquaculture, and some are a little less certain what it is actually, timber, fiber, etc. But most of it are on the list of degradation. So it's serious. This report was later followed up by EPEBS, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. It's meant to be a parallel to IPCC. It is working today. It does not produce annual reports like IPCC, but it produces special reports. And I'm just showing one of them. It's on pollination. And you might know that pollination is a service produced by insects. But in large areas of the world, it's not there any longer. For example, in China, people do pollinate their fruit trees by hand because they don't have enough. And also in Europe, in fact, and United States even more so. Big cars are running around with insects and coming to the fruit tree areas just to help fruit trees to be pollinated. So this is one of the regulating ecosystem services there that is in very bad shape. The values of ecosystem services are, of course, very large. This is just one example. It's a value in US dollars per hectare. It's a forest in Italy. You see some of them have large value. For example, watershed protection is estimated to be about $100 per hectare. So it's a huge value. There's another one in Croatia. You have timber and fuel production. Now the estimation is that it's $120 per hectare. So it's really big. Here is also a reminder that we have an economic value of also of those ecosystem services that are public goods. For example, fresh water, genetic resources, fibers, fire regulation, and so on. All these services have a huge economic value, although they are not paid in US dollars. Often it's difficult to measure these values, but estimations have been done, and sometimes it's easy to put a value on them. A human is always part of an ecosystem, so we depend on it extremely much. Remember that. It's I just would like to show this slide again. It's from a previous lecture. Just to remind you what is needed to have working sustainable ecosystem. Recycling, use sunlight as the ultimate source of energy. Remember, the size of consumer populations can't be too big. And biodiversity has to be maintained. Biodiversity, we talked about much, is very important. I will just finish by mentioning that there are large-scale efforts on ecosystem restoration, and some are really interesting. For example, the Loess Plateau in China is the largest I'm aware of. Huge areas which have been deserts, but now are actually producing a lot of, fruits, vegetables, timber, and so on. We will look at one of these. I hope I'll be able to show it. We will see. So, do you see the film now?
No.
Oh, you have to
No,
move
you don't.
to YouTube, I think.
Aha, okay. Now how I should do this then? Do you see the film now?
Yeah. Yes.
Very good. Then we'll start from the beginning. Yeah, okay. It's a 2-minute film.
I cannot hear the voices.
Aha. Yeah, I don't know what to do with that, in fact. This. Okay. Okay, do you see my picture now?
Yes.
Oh, very good. Aha, now the other one is still running. So I have to get rid of that. Do you hear another voice as well? No? Oh, very good. Okay, so now you see here that on this little film, 2-minute film, you can watch yourself. You saw in the end, you saw the Loess Plateau, where the barren landscape was transformed into a productive one. And there are examples all over the world. So you have one in China, as I mentioned, this one. This is a much longer film. We have the link here. And you see the 2 pictures here to illustrate that. And this is one in Africa, which is also possible to watch. And here you have one in Colombia in South America, which is quite interesting. It's a 15-minute film. I will try to stop my film, otherwise I will have the problem here.
So, and briefly about Uzbekistan. So, general information, it's about 447,000 square kilometers in population. It's more than 35 million inhabitants, and Population density, you can see that about 80 inhabitants per square kilometer. Capital is Tashkent, currency is Sum, it's a rate, you can see rate, and official language is Uzbek. And our major industries, here you can see, major industries of economy, agriculture, food processing, textile, chemical, oil and gas processing, mining, machinery, automotive. We had aircraft, but not anymore, and construction. So briefly about agriculture. So agriculture used area is about 24 million hectares, which is about 2/3 of total area. And of them, about 14% is arable land, and 71% is pasture. And majority of this pasture is on deserts with low green cover, and about 11% is forests, and again major part of these forests are desert forests. And share of agriculture at GDP, it's around 44% of total GDP. So about half of population lives in rural area. As you can see, both in terms of population, location, and GDP, agriculture still major contributor to economy and daily living. So Lars have talked about protected areas. So here we have about 1.5 million hectares of protected natural areas. So in 2017-18, there was increase of protected areas in Uzbekistan, mostly of mountainous areas. So in Tashkent region, in Samarkand region, in some other regions, so our government have increased protected areas in Uzbekistan. So total employed in agriculture, so about 6 million economically active population are employed in agriculture, so full-time or in part-time. So this is remaining about similar, but there are certain trend to decrease in that number on last years. So it believes that cotton is major monoculture in Uzbekistan. So and major consumption of water was scarce natural resource is consumed by cotton production. So cotton production in terms of fiber is decreasing from its peak on mid-80s of last century. So it was around 6 million tons of raw cotton, or 3.5 million tons of fiber cotton. So it's now it's last year it was 1.5 million tons of fiber, and consequently land under cotton is decreasing year by year. And in a second major cash crop in agriculture is wheat. So wheat is mostly produced for food self-sufficiency or food security purposes, and it covers domestic consumption mostly. Despite we are still importing major significant amount of wheat or flour from Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Russia. So we are producing more than 6 million tons of wheat annually. So wheat is second major crop in Uzbekistan. So and recent years, so fruits and vegetables are becoming more and more important. So in terms of net revenue of foreign currency, so fruit and vegetables could compete with cotton now. So wheat and fruit and vegetables also important crops here. So I'll talk briefly about problems of agriculture in Uzbekistan. So we have really limited arable land and more this limitation is because of water scarcity. So arable and irrigated lands are major contributor to agriculture production and measure and important resources. So as you can see from this chart, the arable land per capita is decreasing, and so in rural areas, so less and less available arable land are available for per capita. So pressure on land, on overuse of soil resources by agriculture is caused by this density. So we have, despite that we have about 24 million hectares of land available for agriculture. So only 14% of them are arable, and less of them, so about 12% is irrigated, and main limitation coming from water availability. So Uzbekistan, probably it's a topic for future lectures, but so Uzbekistan is the biggest consumer of water resources in Central Asia, just because it has a share of population. And here you can see that more than 90% of water, scarce resource, is consumed by agriculture. Sorry. So agriculture in Uzbekistan, and for services, which is for civil consumption, it's a 5%, and other industries are consuming insignificantly less amount of water. And water saving is major issue and challenge for agriculture of Uzbekistan. So another pressure on agriculture in terms of ecology or ecosystem systems is land degradation in Uzbek agriculture. So around 700,000 hectares of land is affected by irrigation erosion, which is due to over irrigation or improper irrigation. So, and around 2 million hectares of land is affected by wind erosion. So here was question about from students about the change of temperatures by seasons. So probably it's a big concern, especially among our Urgenç and Karagöl fellows. There are about dust storms we are facing last year, and especially even in Tashkent was affected with a huge dust storm last year. So this dust coming from fields, which is affected by wind erosion. So due to erosion, so in average, it says that 80 tons of soil is moved by wind from per 1 hectare. So it's multiplied by 2 million. It's a huge amount of dust is moving all over Uzbekistan. So, and for example, due to erosion, yield loss in cotton is about 500,000 raw cotton per year. So, and we have revealed some recommendation for sustainable use of resources from available literature. So first one is charges on irrigation water would contribute to improve water management, because water here is especially for agriculture purpose almost for free. It's really low amount of payments are paid for water. So if we introduce water pricing and the land pricing in liberalized markets, they will be market for these commodities, and we propose to reallocation of taxes from land tax to water tax or water payment. As consequence, investment on new methods and technologies such as drip or sprinkler irrigation will be profitable. Here, I would say that our government initiating big subsidies on introduction of drip irrigation or water saving technologies, different types of water saving technologies, up to 50% of this cost covered by government. But by our economical from economical point of view, so introduction of water pricing against land pricing would create more incentives to save water. So we will suggest no cooperation or free determination of crops by farmers. So it's already for most cases it's already implemented, but we have kind of state order type for some crops still. And next proposal is modification of design of leasehold right to be given. Now land tenure is still uncertain despite several measures taken by government last years, and land is given for 30 years to up to 50 years to the farmers for agriculture purpose, but local government could initiate takeover of this land, and this uncertainty preventing farmers from long-term investment on their lands. And of course, protection against erosion, especially on mountains areas, which we could see on film presented by Lars before the break, also could be really useful for Uzbekistan, and others are liberalization on prices and markets and measures to improve the environment should be taken for sustainable use of resources. So these are briefly about agriculture and its impact to sustainable use of natural resources in Uzbekistan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Farhod. It was quite very interesting. It's you have a case of soil degradation in the country, I see here. Yes. That seems quite serious.
Yes.
So we should talk about that further later on. So thank you very much. It's time for Björn now.
Thank you very much. So I will try to then get my presentation shown. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Björn Frostell. I am a retired professor in industrial ecology at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, Sweden. I work as a senior associated consultant with a small company, Loop AB, where we try to contribute to sustainable development. We have a very broad approach, you could say, to resource management, mainly physical resource management in the form of material and energy flows in society, and how to understand society's metabolic activities. And then I'm also serve here in this context today as Vice President for the Swedish Ahrorov Sea Society. It is very nice, and my own, motivation to be part of this is that I really regard that Central Asia and the Aral Sea represents a very, sad and also strong example how mismanagement of ecological resources and human activities, how they can threaten not only Uzbekistan, but also other parts of the world in an increasing speed. To me, this has come out that throughout the years, I have changed, so to say, upside down, where I learned to start with that society works mostly with economic preferences. We have the financial, so to say, systems that we have established. There are different types, but mostly in the globalized society, we have the capitalistic approach. After that, we have the social approach that when we generate resources, so we should distribute them in a good and fair manner. And then we should also care for the ecological sustainability. And as we learn in this course, and that I think that Lars has shown today also, I'm absolutely convinced that we need to turn this totally upside down. And this means that ecology comes first, after this comes the social context, and third comes the financial. And this is, of course, a huge task, but I'm absolutely convinced that it has to take place. And my way of looking at this is that we need to get and shape ourselves into what I call an ecological mindset. And with an ecological mindset, we cannot only discuss the decrease in biodiversity, or if we have a threshold where we have an extinction of one certain species on Earth or not. We need to understand that the first fish we catch in the river or in the sea, or the first tree we cut down, or the first little field of wheat that we grow, this will rupture and change the very dynamic balance that nature has. And that is very dynamic with weather, climate changes, and so on, but it is a balance. And what we still do with our economic system in my world is that we are having a war against nature, and this will end up that we have some kind of a much greater collapse than we have seen so far. And this is also great hope in my mind for a country like Uzbekistan, that, for example, when I see that perhaps 15–20% of your population is working in agriculture, I think that this is a very good asset to bring for the future, in comparison to us in Sweden, where we have less than 1% that are active in farming. So we are on our way to lose the knowledge of what is going on in rural areas, in agriculture and forestry. And that's why I got involved in activities first to grow forests that I do myself since about 20 years. So I save money, not in the bank, I have them in wood in my forest. So I can count my number of trees that are of good quality. And after this, I've been getting in contact also with the food that is, of course, the most essential part of human, commodities that we need. So now I'm involved as part of my activities in something that is called the Fräkentorp Center for Climate Transformation in Agriculture and Forestry. And this is based on what I have named that's what's an ecological mindset. And I have found a number of colleagues and friends that we work together here. And it's only in the beginning, but I would like to show you some examples of this.
It looks like they don't see your pictures in Tashkent, huh? Is that correct, Tashkent? Hello? Tashkent, are you there?
Yes,
Do you see the pictures?
of course.
Ah, okay. Someone was asking for the picture. Huh? Okay, then. Okay, you continue, Björn, then.
Thank you. The vision that we have established, and that is all the time, I mean, under reconsideration and working, is very dynamic. But what we would like here is that we would like to gather different people and organizations that are very interested to develop and spread different types of ecologically sustainable culture systems, and with special emphasis on climate transformation. And that means that the metabolism of carbon in the farming and forestry activities should be as efficient as possible, and that it should also mean that there should be very low emissions into the atmosphere, and rather it should be carbon capture, so to say, in the activities. And it's also, the meaning is to produce both different types of food items, forest raw materials, and also ecosystem services. And here it is very important with this ecological mindset that it's a very broad set. So you cannot only discuss with industry on how to manage a forest. Everyone actually has to be involved in this discussion. And at the same time also of course, then agriculture production systems. And here what I have found so far is that we have a lot of knowledge in Sweden and in the world about agriculture and forest management and how to run such activities. But in my mind, we need to reconsider a number of so-called truths on how we should do things. As an example, I could mention that Sweden is one of 2-3 countries in the world where we have most forest biomass, most trees per person in our country. And we had very little only 120 years ago when our forest law of 1903 came into operation. But the forests, they are very much towards what you could call monocultures of spruce, of pine, and of birch. And that means that our biodiversity is decreasing and has decreased for a lot. And industry says this is totally sustainable and this we should continue, but I don't agree at all. Because we need to be more, looking into different types of ecosystem services, and again, with an ecological mindset. And then in this vision, we have also included that we would like to develop also different types of ethics, ethic consideration that it should, as much as possible, be sustainable work conditions, and also a high level of animal and ecosystem ethics. What we hope to get out of this is a development journey. And that is something we have here in the company where I work, EcoLoop. We try to be part of journeys. So it has a beginning and an end. And the end is, of course, this climate transformation. And it's towards more sustainable farming and forestry activities. And especially we would like to foster small and middle-sized farming and forestry activities. In the Western system, and not only other countries, but in Sweden as well, we have something everywhere which we name as linear, economy of scale. We start with 1 cow, we have then 10 cows, then we have 100 cows, and now the profitable, milk producers, they have typically 1,000 cows, and then you get a very good economy. And we would like this to be that it could be much smaller, because it is not possible in our mind to see that you can maintain a high level of ethics, of animal ethics, if you come up to an incredibly large scale. Then it becomes like they're only, mechanical things. It is like you can produce 1 million mobile phones in a factory, but you should not have 1,000 cows in a farm. Farming and forest activities, they should be much more self-supported with renewable energy. And here I would like to connect to what Lars Rydén mentioned, that you need areas and it's the sun that starts it. So that we work with solar power, this, what would you call the photovoltaics? We work with biogas, and we work also with forestry biomass in, so to say, furnaces for heating systems. And we can see here very good possibilities that farming activities to a very great extent can be totally self-supported with renewable energy, which in my mind means that in the future, it might very well be so that rural areas will be the real interesting areas could work and harvest solar energy and channel it into different types of goods and services for society and for urban areas. We would like to have a more climate-friendly supply of protein, meat, pork, poultry, fish, and so on. And then milk products as well as different types of grains. Another is regarding the forest activities, where we have something that is called clear-cutting technology in Sweden on most farms, where you plant a large area that is totally free of trees, and then you cultivate them for 70 to 80 years on an average, and then you clear cut again on approximately 90 to 95% of the fertile forest areas. And here we would like to introduce that we cut this down to a maximum of 50%, and the other part should be continuous forest or preserved forest. So it's a giant step where you don't allow clear cutting on such large areas. And then as a middle zone between forests and agricultural land, we would like to establish also pollination forest, where you have flowering trees, flowering bushes, and you have perennial plants that provide for insects so that they could do this system that service that Lars mentioned about pollination. So there should be, so to say, the three would be forestry together with pollination systems and with agricultural systems. The existing activities we have there, we have an ecological milk production that is based on 60 cows, and that allows one of these so-called milk machines systems, where the cows, they go voluntarily into and getting milk twice a day, morning and evening. There is ecological meat production based on the bullocks that are being born on the farm. And here it is very important to mention that in Sweden, we have a very strong tendency now to so to say that we should not eat meat. But in this farm, we clearly are in favor of meat as a part of a diet, but the consumption in kilograms per person per year should decrease substantially. That is, I think, very clear. There is ecological feed production on grasslands on this farm. And then we come to the next, that's production of forest raw materials. There's 300 hectares of forest land with mainly spruce, pine, and birch. That is the most common tree types in Sweden. There is photovoltaic energy production with an installed capacity in 2 plants of 160 kilowatts, which means that they can run 2 totally electric cars, and it works very nice, have a range of about 450 kilometers each. And from, you could say, March up to October, they are for their car is totally self-supported and all for other activities on the farm. So they actually have to cut off because they are larger than 69 kilowatts that they can send out to the regular electrical net without problems. When they are getting bigger, you need special permits in Sweden to distribute electrical energy. There is production of heat in wood pellet furnaces with capacity of 80 plus 80 kilowatts. They are fueled by wood chips. And one of these furnaces, it is also possible to produce biocarbon. We are now trimming in this furnace so that you could produce both heat and biocarbon. And biocarbon is assumed to be used together in hygroscopic type of product that helps the water balance in the soil. There is production in an aquaponic system. We produce tilapia in a small scale, about 1 ton per year, where we both have the eggs and the fry and then the large fish. 26 degrees, and it's totally indoors in an old cow barn that is now retrofitted into an aquaponic systems. And then now lately, so there has been a provision of ecosystem services in a newly constructed wetland, and where the main aim is to capture phosphorus that will otherwise pollute the Baltic Sea. And again, this, as Lars mentioned, to contribute to eutrophication. And we have other services there as well that we can see that it will help also fish reproduction of wild species in the lake downstream. What we discuss is that to start up we purchased a 300 cubic meter biogas plant for treatment of the manure from the cows and other organic waste. We are discussing about establishment of a local region network with farmers around 4 or 5 farms that could cooperate, and where we have established mutual learning exchange and also discuss how to come further. We would like to construct a wetland so that we could have improved reproduction of pike, which is a very important Swedish fish. And there is something called, since about 10 years, that is called the pike factory, where you can improve, so to say, the production of small fry of pike with a factor of 10 if you do it in a proper way that will help, so to say, the stock of fish then in the lake and streams around. And this is then a very natural, extensive method of reproduce fish for consumption. Financing activities, we are now applying for money to try to evaluate both the whole system and the parts thereof. And then another thing is we would like to start up organized visit and education programs, but because we feel that the urban population, they don't know what is going on in the rural areas of Sweden and how food actually is produced. There is a huge knowledge gap, since you only go down to a store that typically in Sweden has 50,000 different types of products that you can simply buy. So if you have the money, you don't need or to think at all about what is actually going on and how the food and your products are coming or being produced. And then the pictures around here, you can see on top, so on the side, you can see a pasture land that is established as this land between agricultural land and the forest. In the middle, you can see the barn where we have the aquaponics, and you can see the smaller of the photovoltaic, 35 kilowatts plant. And to the right is just as an example of a Swedish production forest. It is my own farm that is north of Stockholm, so it's separated from this Fräkentorp, but where I have developed, so to say, the ideas of how to produce different things. So this is to produce for industrial use and not, so to say, for ecology. This is some kind of a sacrifice to a current way of looking at forestry and industrial production in Sweden. On this picture in the rear...
Jag tror att du är färdig snart, för nu är tiden slut. Men...
Ja, jag har 1 minut bara.
Ja, fint. Mm.
So here you can see the farming with the cows, and also you can see absolutely in the middle a small part of this biogas plant. Down to the left, you see the barn where we have retrofitted into the aquaponics production plant. You can see tilapia fry. Here you can see the biogas digester. It is not in operation yet, but you can see it is in place. Here you have a 125 kilowatt solar plant integrated into the roof. And what the picture is there, bad, taken yesterday morning at 7:30. So the light was not the best, but you can see that you cannot really see that this is a power plant. It's a 125 kilowatt power plant. And here you can see the newly constructed wetland where you have the little creek coming straight forward, where part of the water passes, but the main part is going to the left where phosphates that are mostly particle bound is sedimented so that it is not reaching the lake downstream. And then there is a short booklet that is in Swedish, but I will translate it and put it on the homepage so that you can see a bit more. And if someone is interested, you are very welcome to contact me to get more information on this center and this idea of how to run a farm in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Björn. So great. We had two really good applied presentations from Farhod and from you. And that makes the end of this lecture. I will put on the for the lecture in my presentation, so you can have a look at it there. And well, then we will see each other in 1 hour then. 10 minutes after it's 5 o'clock your time, I think. So please be present then, and we listen to presentations by the student.